Why? What makes these humans so dangerous? The question hung heavy in the vast chamber of the Galactic Council. The silence was absolute, a stark contrast to the usual hum of 1,000 alien species deliberating the fate of galaxies. All eyes, stalks, and sensory organs were fixed on Ziller, the ancient keeper of records, whose holographic form shimmered at the center of the hall. Ziller let the silence linger, a master storyteller preparing his audience. Then, his voice, a symphony of resonating chimes, filled the space. The quarantine of Sol 3, what its inhabitants call Earth, was not an act of malice. It was an act of preservation, an act of fear. To understand, you must journey back with me 20,000 of their years to a time when we first encountered them. They were not spacefaring then. They were primitives, huddled in caves, just mastering fire. But even then, they were different. We sent a standard observation drone, a simple non-sentient probe, to catalog their biology and culture. It was supposed to be a routine survey. It was anything but. The drone observed them for a single planetary rotation. It recorded their hunts, their primitive art, their social structures, and then it recorded something impossible. One of them, a female of the species, looked directly at the cloaked drone. She pointed, not with fear, but with curiosity. The drone's stealth field was perfect, impenetrable to any known biological sense, yet she saw it. Within an hour, a group of them had surrounded the drone's position. They didn't attack it, they studied it. They threw stones at the empty air where it hovered, noting the faint distortions. They created loud noises, trying to gauge a reaction. The council at the time dismissed it as an anomaly, a 1 in a trillion mutation. They were wrong. We left them alone, classifying them as a low-priority pre-FTL species. We returned 5,000 years later. They had built cities of stone and bronze. They had developed complex languages, mathematics, philosophy. Their progress was alarming. It had outpaced the standard developmental curve of any known species by a factor of 10. Again, we sent a cloaked probe. This time, they detected it within minutes. Not with primitive senses, but with crude astronomical tools they had fashioned themselves. They tracked its movements against the stars. They calculated its orbit. They knew something was up there, watching them. The council grew concerned. A debate raged. Were they a threat or a prodigy? The consensus was to observe, but from a greater distance. We pulled our assets back to the edge of their solar system. It was a fatal mistake. It gave them the one thing they needed most, room to grow. We watched as they tore their world apart and rebuilt it a dozen times over. Their capacity for both creation and destruction was unlike anything we had ever witnessed. One moment they were composing music that could make a rock weep. The next they were unleashing energies that scarred their own planet. They moved from stone tools to splitting the atom in what was, for us, the blink of an eye. Their defining characteristic, the one that truly terrifies the Council, is not their intelligence or their aggression. It is their adaptability. Their sheer, unrelenting, chaotic adaptability. When we quarantined them, it wasn't just about their technology. It was about their ideas, their philosophy, their art, their stories. Human concepts are infectious. Let me give you an example. The G-Theer system, a peaceful, rigidly structured society that had remained unchanged for 50,000 years. A stray human radio signal from the 20th century, a simple broadcast of what they called rock and roll music, breached the quarantine. It was meaningless noise to our translators. To the G-Theer, it was a revelation. Their rigid societal structures crumbled in less than 200 years. They didn't have a war. They just stopped conforming. Their civilization, a pillar of stability in this galactic quadrant, dissolved into a billion individualistic artists. They called it the awakening. The council called it a catastrophe. Another example. The Pitheks, a species of pure logic, intercepted a fragment of a human philosophical text. Just a few sentences about something called free will. Within a generation, their hive mind collapsed. They were a collective consciousness, and the mere concept of individuality fractured them, leading to a century of civil war. Humans don't conquer you with warships. They conquer you with a song, a story, a question. They plant an idea in your mind, and it grows like a weed, choking out millennia of tradition and certainty. They are a biological, cultural, and philosophical virus. That is why we built the veil. The quarantine isn't just a physical barrier, it's an informational one. A multi-layered reality distortion field designed to keep them in, and more importantly, to keep their influence from getting out. But it's failing. Their own technological growth is now pushing against the veil. They are sending probes, not just into their solar system, but beyond. They are broadcasting signals with such power and complexity that they are beginning to tear holes in the fabric of the quarantine. They are shouting into the darkness, and we are terrified of what will happen when something answers. The true secret, the one that keeps the High Council awake during their regeneration cycles, is this: the quarantine was never meant to be permanent. It was a stopgap, a desperate attempt to slow them down, to give us time to figure out what to do. The original plan, debated in hushed tones, was to extinguish their star, to wipe the slate clean before the infection could spread. But we couldn't do it. How can you extinguish a species that writes poetry about the stars you want to snuff out? How can you condemn a people who, despite all their flaws, love with a ferocity that defies logic? We hesitated. And in our hesitation, they grew stronger. Now, their science is on the verge of discovering principles we ourselves have only recently mastered. Their understanding of dimensional physics is accelerating. They are beginning to see the edges of their cage. They are not just knocking on the door anymore. They are figuring out how to pick the lock. So you ask me why they are dangerous. They are dangerous because they are the embodiment of change. They are chaos in a universe that craves order. They are a question mark in an equation we thought was solved. They are the ultimate wild card, and they are coming. The reason we are having this council meeting today, the reason I have broken millennia of silence, is that one of their probes, a craft they call Voyager, has just done something impossible. It hasn't breached the veil. It has gone through it, not by force, but by adapting to it. It rewrote its own programming, reconfigured its own physical structure, and passed through the quarantine field as if it were nothing more than morning fog. The probe is now broadcasting, not just its location, not just scientific data. It is broadcasting music, art, the sum of their history, their hopes, their dreams. It is a message in a bottle, cast into the cosmic ocean, and it is headed for the heart of the galaxy. We can no longer hide from them. We can no longer contain them. The age of humanity is about to begin. The question is no longer what we will do to them. The question is, what will they do to us?